Good morning. We are so glad that you're back this week. We are so excited to get started with some praise songs, but we want to make sure that you tag your friends and share this page because we want as many people as we can collectively worshiping this morning. We're so glad to see you. So everybody gather around your screens. We're getting ready to get started with one called Holy Water. Y'all ready? All right, here we go. Abby's going to lead us on this one. Y'all ready to sing? Come on, sing it out.
It's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips, like the sound of a symphony to my ears, like holy water on my skin.
Bring light to the darkness, you give hope give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord.
Come on, sing it out.
It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
So, Lord, we pour out our praise in our homes. We want to cover our homes with your praise, God, because we know that you inhabit our praise. We want to cover our homes with praise. Let's lift it up. Come on. All the earth will shout.
All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord.
Come on, sing it out.
All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord.
The Bible says the rocks will even cry out. Come on.
All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Come on. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. To you only, God.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us on our worship.
Do you hear that?
You hear that?
Do you hear that?
You hear that?
That's the sound of your people crying out to you.
The cries of concerned parents.
The cries of concerned children.
The cries of the lonely.
Do you see that?
You see that?
Do you see that?
Do you see that?
People are scared.
People are hurting.
People are sick.
People are dying.
Do you care?
Care.
Do you care?
You care?
Churches aren't meeting.
Food shortages are everywhere.
There is a disease without hope of a cure ravaging our planet.
With no timeline for an end in sight.
Where are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
You said.
You said.
You said.
You said.
You said, I am your very present help in times of trouble.
You said, by my stripes you are healed.
You said, I will never leave you or forsake you.
You said, I will keep you from all harm. I will watch over your life.
Where are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
I want to believe, but
You aren't doing anything.
I want to believe, but
You remain silent.
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 I'm so glad you're with our Journey Church family as we gather online for worship. We're concluding today our series, God Help Me. And today we're focusing on withstanding suffering. We're going to consider an amazing story. It's one you may have heard of, but you may not know very much about it. It's a story that takes seriously the reality of human suffering. It's the story of Job. Listen to how the book begins. There was a man named Job living in the land of Uz who worshiped God and was faithful to him. He was a good man, careful not to do anything evil. Now, it's important to get that Job was one of the greatest men among all the peoples of the East. And it's significant that he was not a part of the people of Israel, just like we aren't. But he was a man who was moral and faithful. He was blessed with a family and many possessions. He had a wonderful life. Now, there's something key to understanding the story of Job. At that time, it was believed that the amount of blessing you received was proportional to the amount of your obedience to God. If you obeyed God, you'd be blessed. If you weren't blessed, it was because you didn't obey God. It was believed that you only get what you deserved. It was believed if bad things happened to you, if you experienced chaos, confusion, despair, if you suffered, you brought it on yourself because you weren't living the way God desired. But if you lived for God, only good things would come to your life. Now, that belief was only in the past, right? No one thinks that way anymore, do they? In the story, God and Satan are having a conversation, and God points to Job and how upright and blameless he is. Satan replied, "Would Job worship you if he got nothing out of it? You have always protected him and his family and everything he owns. You bless everything he does, and you have given him enough cattle to fill the whole country. But now suppose you take away everything he has. He will curse you to your face. Satan essentially says, yeah, Job obeys you, but only because he knows he's going to get something out of the deal. What do you expect? The only reason he lives a life that honors you is because of what you do for him. If you didn't bless him, he'd turn his back on you in a minute. Is that true? Think a moment. Satan is the great deceiver, but is he wrong here? Isn't it true that when we suffer, we're tempted to turn from God? When you've gone through a hard time in your own life, have you ever contemplated just chucking the whole God thing? What's the use if you don't get what you want out of it? Why bother? If you don't benefit from trying to live God's way, what's the use? Has that ever crossed your mind? Be honest now. God was confident that there was more to Job's faithfulness than just what Job got out of it. So God let Satan tempt Job because God did not believe Job would curse him. Satan didn't hold back. Job lost his wealth, his livestock, his servants, and most devastating of all, his children, without warning, without explanation. How would you respond if that happened to you? Listen to how Job responded. Then Job got up and tore his clothes in grief. He shaved his head, threw himself face downward on the ground. He said, I was born with nothing, and I will die with nothing. The Lord gave, and now he has taken away. May his name be praised. In spite of everything that had happened, Job did not sin by blaming God. In response to the crushing news, Job was engulfed with grief. He experienced sorrow to the core of his being. And when we experience loss, when we suffer, we grieve. Say that with me. When we suffer, we grieve. The pain of Job's loss was almost overwhelming, and amazingly, he worshiped. He praised God. He speaks words of blessing. He did not blame God. How many of us could say the same if we lost almost everything we loved and possessed? Now, a lot of people think that the key question in the book of Job is, where is God when we suffer? Where is God when we hurt? John Ortberg says that's not really the main focus. He says something different is at stake. Satan, in essence, says, God, Job worships you, but the only reason he does is because it's in his self-interest. So of course he's going to. It's just quid pro quo. You scratch his back, he scratches yours. God, you're fooling yourself. You think Job loves you. He doesn't really love you. He just loves what he gets out of you. You turn off the faucet of blessing. You turn off the faucet of your protection and watch how fast Job turns off the faucet of devotion. Satan is saying this whole idea of sacrificial love is hogwash. Satan is saying the truth is that everybody's looking out for number one. It's survival of the fittest. God says no. God says this view is cynical, warped, wrong. God says that selfishness is not what's at the core of the universe. Love is sacrificial love. Love that's not dependent on what we get out of something. Self-giving love, even suffering love, is what gives meaning to the universe. Is what gives meaning to all relationships. If not, there's no hope. And God says there is hope, hope that His love is greater than even our suffering. That's what's at stake in this story. Satan says, "No way." Listen to how Satan replied. A person will give up everything in order to stay alive. But now, suppose you hurt his body. He will curse you to your face. Satan afflicts Job with painful sores all over his body. Now, this time, Job responds differently. This time, he does not say, "May God's name be praised." There are people who, when things go wrong, at first they say a bunch of holier than thou words. But then, when things don't get better, they begin to rethink the whole praising God thing. How did Job respond to this second round of suffering? Job went and sat by the garbage dump and took a piece of broken pottery to scrape his sores. His wife said to him, "You are still as faithful as ever, aren't you? Why don't you curse God and die?" Okay, Job is down, really down. And his wife tries to be encouraging, right? Wrong. She says, "Why don't you curse God and die?" How's that for being a supportive spouse? Now, before we start dumping on Mrs. Job, let's remember she too has lost pretty much everything she had, including her children. And now she's faced with the prospect of caring for a horribly diseased husband until he dies, after which she'll be left alone and destitute and will probably starve to death herself. She knows this. She gives voice to what some of us may think when we're suffering, but we may not be able to bring ourselves to actually say the words. Job is often thought of as being a person who suffered nobly. But the truth is, Job struggles. He struggles to understand God. Does God send trouble into our lives? Does God send evil? Is God really good? How many of us have asked those same questions? Now, several of Job's friends heard of how he was suffering, so they decided to come see him. When they did, they hardly recognized him because he was so diseased, and they began to weep. Then they sat there on the ground with him for 7 days and nights without saying a word, because they saw how much he was suffering. There are people who visit with others who are sick, and then they try to cheer them up. They tell them, "It's not so bad." Job's friends saw no use in pretending. It was bad. So they just sat with him in silence. Now, there's an important lesson here. When we suffer, we need others. Say that with me. When we suffer, we need others. When life is difficult, we need people. We aren't meant to suffer in isolation. We need community. That's why being physically separated from one another during this pandemic is so hard. Scripture teaches that we're to mourn with those who mourn. It doesn't say, give really good advice to people who mourn. It doesn't say, try and fix people who mourn. It doesn't say, tell them they need to snap out of it in 2 days and get on with their lives. It's the act of being with one another in genuine caring. That's what we need. And in lovingly being there for one another, God can work in ways that we may not understand, which go way deeper than words. Instead of talking, there are times to sit in silence with people as they suffer and grieve. We don't have to know the right words to say. The ministry of silent presence is what they need. After 7 days, Job's friends speak a lot, and they get into trouble for it. But their silence at first was a gift of true friendship. Do you have people like that in your life? People who love you and don't pretend to have all the answers. I hope we are that kind of people at Journey Church. In those 7 days, Job continued to struggle in the silence. And we may think that when he finally speaks again, he will praise God's name. His time of testing will be over. But that's not what happened. Finally, Job broke the silence and cursed the day on which he had been born. Job experienced devastating losses. He suffered terribly. And the way he responded this time would definitely keep him off the motivational speaker's circuit. He wouldn't make his fortune by writing a self-help book that told of how he triumphed over adversity. Job did not curse God, but he cursed the day he was born. Job was mad. In his suffering, he became angry. And when we suffer, we can become angry. Some people think that becoming angry automatically means you sin. It doesn't. Anger is our response to threat. Being angry in the midst of hard times isn't unusual, it's the norm. People talk about having the patience of Job. They have not read this book in the Bible. For the next 28 chapters, Job pours out anger, confusion, and bitterness toward God. It's amazing that this book made it into the Bible. Now, Job's friends can't stand the anger that Job is expressing toward God, and they start arguing with him over it. They've bought into the whole idea that if things are going well for you, it's because you've honored God. And if you're suffering, it's because you've done bad and angered God. Now, if you read the book of Job, be honest, it gets boring in the middle. It's argument after argument with the friends about their belief that he deserved his suffering. Now, Job does not claim to be perfect. What he does essentially say is, my life used to be great. Now, my life is terrible. But I'm the same guy. So whatever is going on, it's got to be something deeper than the idea that all bad that happens to you is something you bring on yourself. Job reaches the point where he wants to know what God has to say about his suffering. He tries to accuse God and cling to God at the same time. He says, I would state my case before him and present all the arguments in my favor. I want to know what he would say and how he would answer me. Job's got questions and he wants answers. And aren't we like that? When we suffer, we question. Are you relating to any of this? You experience hurt. You suffer. And you're tempted to turn from God. You grieve. You struggle. You get angry. And you want to know why. Why? Now, this may be hard to take. But to be honest, in the book of Job, God does not get around to answering the question of why they're suffering. We may wish God did, but He doesn't. This is what happened. From out of a storm, the Lord said to Job, why do you talk so much when you know so little? God asked Job a bunch of questions he can't answer, like, where were you when the world was created? Where were you when the stars were put into place? Now, some people take this to mean that God is saying, I'm big, you're small, tough for you. What I think is happening is that God is pointing out that Job has a finite mind and a limited point of view, so there are things that are just beyond his understanding. And when we suffer, we don't understand. Evidently, we humans don't have the capacity to understand the purpose of suffering. So, in the story of Job, God recounts how he created the ostrich and other animals just for the delight of it, just so he could show his love. And as God tells Job these things, it begins to dawn on Job that even though he doesn't understand about suffering, he does understand the character of God. He does understand the very nature of God. God is a God who delights in us, a God who lovingly made us, a God who cherishes us. And how did Job respond this time? He said, I heard about you from others. Now I have seen you with my own eyes. Job did not get the kind of answer he hoped for concerning his suffering. But he did find hope because he personally experienced the wonder and goodness and love of God. He experienced God's presence, which is what strengthens and encourages us in tough times, times that are too much for our limited understanding to grasp. God showed up, and Job understood this much. God would give him comfort and hold his hand and never let him go, no matter what he would go through in his life. Satan was dead wrong about Job. Job held on to faith and life and love, even when it didn't seem that there was any payoff at all. Sitting on that trash heap, scraping the boils off his skin, broke, confused, feeling abandoned. Job's honesty and perseverance showed that God could be trusted even when we don't understand. There is hope even when we don't understand. And when we don't understand, the example of Job shows to all of us who suffer, all of us who know anguish, who agonize, who hurt, who question, don't give up, don't quit, hang in there. We all suffer. Why? I don't know why. I just know that God is greater than our sufferings. And I know that when we suffer, God is with us in the midst of it. That's the story of Jesus and the cross. Almost 2,000 years ago, Jesus suffered an agonizing death on the cross. He struggled, he questioned, but he knew that God's love was greater than anything else in the entire universe. You see, at the very heart of God, there's a cross. So God knows. God understands our suffering. He isn't some uncaring God. God enters into our sufferings with us, and in some way that we cannot comprehend, God redeems them. God does not abandon us in the midst of difficult times. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, the Lord is with us. I know. In the past several months, I've stood at the gravesides of both my mom and my wife Debbie's dad. Yes, there was sadness. Yes, there was sorrow. But even more, there was a sense of God's love that never fails and of godly hope that never lets us go. No matter what it is that you're facing, No matter what pain you may be experiencing, no matter how alone and confused you may feel, please, please know that even in the midst of it, the grace and mercy of God will uphold you and strengthen you. Like Job, will you trust in God's goodness and character even when you do not understand all that's going on in the world and is happening in your life? Like Job, will you hold on to faith and life and love? Will you cling to hope even in the dark times? Well, will you? I invite you to close your eyes. And right now, I'm going to lead in a prayer of commitment. And you may have been struggling with physical pain. You may have been struggling with financial difficulties. You may have been struggling inside yourself spiritually, wondering if there's any hope. I'm going to be leading in a prayer. And right where you are, if you have never before trusted your life to the God who is perfect love, the God who is with us in the midst of every experience of life, I'm going to invite you to pray along with me. Dear God, there are so many things in life that I just don't understand. And in some ways, I'm blessed, God, and I don't deserve it. And there are other things in life, God, that I'm going through that I don't deserve them either. So I admit there are things that I just don't get. But I do recognize, God, that there's this brokenness inside of me. There's this void inside of me. I acknowledge that there is sin and selfishness inside of me. And it's kept me distant from you, God, and it's impacted my relationships in unhealthy ways. And so, God, I confess that. And God, I ask you to forgive me of my sin and my selfishness. And God, I ask you to give me a fresh start, a second chance, a new beginning. And even though there are things I don't understand, Lord, I do believe that you sent your one and only Son, Jesus, into the world. And out of sacrificial love, he died on the cross for my sin. And then I believe, God, that he was buried in the tomb and then he was raised to new life so that I might have new life. And so, God, right now, as best as I understand, I commit myself in faith to follow in the way of Jesus, to believe that no matter what I go through, he will walk with me. And so, God, right now, I accept your love for me. And I pray, God, that you will start transforming my life as I've made the decision today for the rest of my life to be a follower of Jesus. I pray this in his strength and power. Amen. Now, if today you have made a commitment of faith, we want to encourage you in that at Journey Church. We'd like to help you to continue to grow in your faith. And so I invite you to email us or text us or give us a call so that we might follow up and help you to move forward in the journey of faith. Would you do that? Or if you're new to Journey Church, I invite you to check out our website to learn more about us. And today, particularly if you're new, would you let us know who you are? Again, email us, call us, send us a text so that we might connect with you, find out ways that we might help you. We want you to know that in this time we're providing online spiritual growth experiences and fellowship opportunities, and you can find all that information on our website. Or if you'd like to start getting our weekly emails with this information, send us your email address. At Journey, we really want to make a difference in being the love of Jesus Christ. And we want to offer you the opportunity to invest financially in that, to make that possible, as we seek to minister with children and youth and adults, as we seek to provide for people who are hungry and hurting and homeless. One of our ministry partners is called the Society of St. Andrews, and they feed hungry people. And so we invite you to contribute financially, to be generous in your giving to Journey Church so that we can support these mission partners. You can find out how to give through our website, or you can call our church office, or you can send mail with a check in it. Whatever seems best to you, we thank you for partnering with us in this. And want you to know that we begin a new series next week. It's called Welcome to the Jungle. I invite you to come back and be with us next Sunday. Invite your friends, tag your friends, share, share, share. Again, thank you so much for worshiping with us at Journey Church. May God bless you all.
Morning. Nate.
Ow!
There you go.
Are these poached eggs?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm. 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 Oh. Mm. 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 Oh, this is so good. I can't wait to see what you guys do next week. For Mother's Day?
We hope you will join us on our final praise song, Mighty to Save. Yeah, let's put those hands together. Come on. Yeah, that's right. Our God is so good in this place today. Lord, we just worship you. We thank you for your salvation. so glad to hear you all out there. You sounded great out there. We are so glad that you joined us today. And we hope that if you would like to join us in our virtual lobby, you will do so. And that way you can talk to your friends there and connect with maybe some new friends. And so there'll be a link below that you can click on. There's also some instructions on your screen about if you need a prayer request that you can follow. And so we are looking forward to seeing you again next week. And make sure you bring a friend. We'll see y'all next week.